Welcome back, friends. This week I am delighted to bring you my conversation with Rabbi Benjy Morgan, CEO of the Jewish Learning Exchange, commonly known as the JLE. Rabbi Benjy Morgan is responsible for the innovation and strategy of the JLE in the 21st century. He oversees education across the numerous different departments in which the JLE operates. He guides dozens of dedicated staff and a myriad of weekly programs that service over 1,000 individuals each week. There were two particular stories that I wanted to bring up in my conversation, but some last-minute changes to Rabbi Morgan's diary meant that we ended up recording this conversation a few short hours before a flight out of the country. Instead, I have appended recordings of these stories, one at the beginning, a moving and beautiful narrative that gives us insight into the miraculous story of Rabbi Morgan's family, and one at the end, which is an account of Rabbi Morgan's own personal miracle story, which took place in 2019, with a message for Chanukah as we enter the month of Kislev. I hope you enjoy.
I'm here in Theresienstadt, a concentration camp just on the outskirts of Prague, where over 130,000 Jews were deported and met their deaths, 30,000 of whom died in this very place. An additional 87,000 Jews were brought here and transported on to Auschwitz, Birkenau, Dachau, and many other places. Here is a tragic cemetery of over 1,000 Jews that were liberated, but never got to see the free world. Before they were able to make it out, they died here from starvation, malnutrition, and disease. But in our history, against the backdrop of true darkness, of true destruction, we have always found a way to bring light, emunah, and hope. And in this concentration camp, here in Theresienstadt, behind this craftsman's shed, a discovery was made 15 years ago, where Asher Balinga, who was sent to his death in Auschwitz in 1944, built a synagogue in hiding, at risk of death. And if you look inside this synagogue, you will find unbelievable things. Here on the walls, you see the hope, the prayer that Jews have said for thousands of years, of hoping for a rebuilt Jerusalem. But perhaps the most shocking of all is here, where on the wall it's inscribed, "Uvechol zois shimcha lo shachachnu." With all that has transpired to us, we have not forgotten you, Hashem. Here in the place of death and destruction, Jews gathered with hope, with a ray of light, with emunah, holding on to that belief that some of us would make it out and that the Jewish people would live on. On June 16, 1942, a train arrived here in this camp from Cologne in Germany. On it was a couple, Simon and his wife, Eva. But by the 27th of June and the 19th of August, both were no longer alive. Their entire families were wiped out. They had a son that had made it to the UK just before the war and built a family. They had 3 children, Michael, Daniel, and Ruth. Ruth went on to build a Jewish home and through growth and learning reconnected with her past. And at their eldest son, as he made his bar mitzvah of Ruth's first grandchild in 2019, just before COVID, over 100 offspring from the respective 2 families were in the room. That backdrop of absolutely giving up, of challenge, of thinking there is no hope. From this very camp, over 100 offspring came from that one survivor. And I know that because my mother, Ruth, was at my son's bar mitzvah there in 2019. And as we stand here at the site of where my great-grandparents met their death, we must know and remember this mixed emotion of feeling of tragedy, of persecution, and of the knowledge that so many people lost their lives in vain. And imagine if those people all would have survived, how many more Jews there would be today. But equally, Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba. The Torah is a tree of life. And like a tree, if all you have is one seed, we can rebuild, and we do. Hashem does not forget us. No'al tishkachenu, as Asher Berlinger said, please do not forsake us. For thousands of years we have not been forsaken. We get up against all the odds. We rise again by holding on to that tree of life, by believing that Netzach Yisrael lo yeshaker, the promise that Hashem made thousands of years ago to our forefathers, that against all the odds we will live on. And that, against the backdrop of darkness, is the message from this place.
Born in New York, raised in Gateshead, learnt in Passaic, studied in Israel, and now living here in Golders Green. Phenomenal journey, and I know your calendar is ram-packed, and I appreciate you giving me the time this morning. But I would like to zoom into one part of your journey, and that is being a Talmud of Rabbi Berkowitz, the Jerusalem Kollel. Now, to the outside world, we see the output, the outgrowth, the leadership. What would you say defines what Rabbi Berkowitz is doing at the Jerusalem Kollel, and how has he managed to empower so many to achieve so much? A very strong sense of mission, reverence, and a real responsibility to embark on their own individual journeys, but staying loyal to this collective mission. What is going on at the Jerusalem Kollel?
I left the Jerusalem Kollel close to 15 years ago, so I can't speak about what's going on today, and I'm sure it's phenomenal and still great. What attracted me to the Jerusalem Kollel was a complete mistake. I was actually not intending to go there at all, and I was planning on going to a completely different kollel in a different country. And it was 2008, and I'd been accepted into this kollel, which was funded in a certain way, and there was a crash, and they said, sorry, we've pulled the funding. So I walked into a few different options, and a friend of mine, Moti Litwin, said, why don't you come to this kollel? So I walked in, and I saw them learning from sheets, and I'd learned in Kaplan and in Passaic, and in places where we didn't learn from sheets. So I kind of made a U-turn and walked out. And at that point, I got a tap on the shoulder from, this is actually an amazing Yoel Gold story, because it was actually from Yoel Gold, who had been a chavrusa of mine for 3 years in Passaic, and I didn't even know he was learning there in the afternoons. And he says, Benji, I haven't seen you for ages. What's going on? And if this was a Yoel Gold story, then we'd cut to him now, but he's not here, so I'll just... So Yoel says to me, I said to him, yeah, I'm looking, this kollel's fallen through, but I don't think it's for me. He says, no, I'm learning here. Let's come and learn with me. And whether we do the sheets or not is irrelevant, but we'll learn together. So that the rest of history, I stayed there for another 3 years. And it was a little gold mine of time, a golden age of time, because we were learning there together. And there were an amazing chabura of people, which I would say, to answer your question, it's not only about the incredible impact Rabbi Berkowitz has on both the husbands and the wives, I should say. It's also about the chabura that we had, and that I think is still there, of people which are passionate about doing something incredible for Klal Yisrael. People who are with me, in the kollel. Just before me was Shlomo Fachi and Daniel Rowe, but alongside me was Yonatan Razel and Rabbi Cowan and Yoel Gold and many people who you'll know.
Celebrity lineup there.
Yeah, no, it was and the Ben Shushans were there. We were, but I would say that the most incredible thing about the kollel was, obviously parallel to Rabbi Berkowitz, was the chabura of passionate people. I may even say the network that that became out of that was also incredible. But there almost isn't a city in the world now that you can't pick up the phone to someone and find. But Rabbi Berkowitz, what his vision and dream was to take people which were talented b'nei Torah and to infuse them with a sense of achrayus for Klal Yisrael, to make sure that the wives were on board as well, which was really important. My wife found a huge amount of inspiration, and whenever she hears Rabbi Berkowitz speak, she still kind of reminisces and thinks back to that wonderful time. And Rabbi Berkowitz is a very great man. He's a giant of a man, not only in Torah, but in terms of breadth and shoulders and responsibility, and at the same time being completely non-judgmental, but also very demanding, which is an unusual mix. Usually people who are non-judgmental, so live and let live. He's very non-judgmental, completely understands where every Jew, every person is coming from, but yet demands the highest levels of Avodas Hashem from himself and from everyone else. So really an extraordinary few years, and very grateful that I had that time there.
Fascinating. Would you say that experience helped shape your ability to articulate and your public speaking and that persona that you're known for?
So I'm going to say something controversial.
Go on.
Forgive me, anyone who's listening this from any kollel, especially Jerusalem kollel. I actually, from the subscribers to the belief that everyone has incredible koichas and everyone has something very unique about them. In fact, it's a chazal, like Shem She'im Partzufeim Doimeh Zeh Lezeh. Like just like our faces are not the same, just like our DNA is not the same, just like our fingerprint is not the same, so too every person has a unique talent and koiches, something that they've brought to the world that no one else has ever brought and no one else ever will bring. And Rabbi Berkowitz used to speak a lot about that. But I would say that it's not for everyone, and every person has their own koiches and something that they can bring. The controversy of what I'm about to say is that I think that his koil is best used for, I'm a musician, so I would say if you're musical, then learn how to improve your musical skills. And you cannot compare someone who's musical and has got an amazing teacher to someone who doesn't have an amazing teacher. But equally, you can't compare to someone who just is not musical at all and is trying to learn how to sing. Right. So I would say that the koil is an amazing place to fine tune and to hone. I remember, as an example, Yoel Gold, when he was in camp and when he was in yeshiva, he didn't become Yoel Gold in the koil. And I would say that about many people. Yonatan Razel didn't become musical in the koil, and it's not a magic place. Right. It is a place where if you are passionate and if you are artistic and if you are talented, that you can have a great teacher and a great master who can bring that out and who can inspire and infuse you with something even greater.
That's very powerful.
It reminds me a lot of the rich man's bell, that famous story of the guy who was poor, and he goes and finds the rich man's bell and he takes it home and he shows his kids and he's like, look at this, what this bell does, and no one comes when he rings the bell. Right. So it's a little bit like that. There is a necessity for us to understand that I think that every person has incredible potential, but find that potential within you and then hone it and find the musical talent. If you're not the type of person that is artistic in this way, Rabbi Berkowitz isn't going to make you one.
Interesting, fascinating perspective. It's no secret that the impact and the direction in which you've taken the JLE has been very bold. The energy, the events, the numbers. Where would you say the JLE was before you joined, and where did you want to take it once you assumed this position? And I want to layer the question a bit with an extra level as well, that there are many people who go into Kislev perhaps with this ambition, this drive to make an impact and to change people's lives, but they're quite happy being the ticket collector rather than being the train driver. At what point did you say, I'm going to do this and do this properly from a senior position top down with this really bold vision to take something that had already been built and established to the completely next level?
Well, look, the JLE has always been fabulous and was always looked at as a place of a premier Kislev organization. It started back in 1983, and then it went on through the 80s and 90s under Rabbi Kirsch's leadership, and Rabbi Kirsch was the one who brought me in to JLE in 2011. So it wasn't me who suddenly made it amazing. I came into something which was extraordinary. I mean, to have people like Rabbi Tatz, Rabbi Aubrey Hirsch, world-class educators, leaders, teachers. There isn't many Kislev organizations that have been around for 40 years or 40 plus years and that have that level of education and educator in it. So it's always prided itself on being like a premier brand, a premier model. And that is in itself something that has nothing to do with me. I think that what Rabbi Kirsch wanted was to continue his legacy, and that's what he asked me to do when I took kind of more of a senior position within the JLE. But I'll tell you something else, a little secret, which is that from the day I arrived, I kind of took a responsibility within the areas of responsibility which I had to try and drive whatever I was doing forward. So the ticket collector mindset, if you are that ticket collector mindset, it doesn't change when you take a senior position or if that power is bestowed on you. And if you're a train driver mindset, then even when you're given a more junior position, you try and drive the areas that you can drive. So I always say to people, again, that I believe a lot in, there's two different things. There's innate power and bestowed power. Innate power is the talents Hashem's given you, and then bestowed power are the positions, like the frack, the two buttons that you get put on the back or the Homburg. And I'm a big believer in innate power. I believe that you're even more powerful when it's innate power combined with bestowed power. But if you're no good, if you're not enough without the job title, then you'll never be enough with it. It's a really important idea that, whatever you find yourself, try and drive and become that most senior person within you. No, not that anyone else knows about it, but the best version of you within whatever environment you find yourself, because you don't wait till the opportunity presents itself. Make the opportunity within the opportunities that can be given to you.
Love that. Really love that mindset. Well, what was your vision though? Where did you want to take it? Was there something specific that you said, I can bring, with me maximizing my potential, I can bring it from point A to point B?
I think that what JLE has always been incredible at doing is allowing itself to pivot. It's a overused word today, especially from COVID. I remember hearing it for the first time, but I love the word, and it is a really important word because we live in a really fast-changing world. I once heard from Rabbi Joey Grunfeld, who was Makar of my parents. He once said at a Kislev conference, he said, in Kislev, you either adapt or die. And I think that JLE, from 1983, when it started in Maida Vale and then came to the center, and then when people were looking for kind of in-person lectures board in Rabbi Tats, all that type of thing, the idea of a constant changing world, what do people want, and then how can we pivot and address those needs? And it's completely the opposite of stale or bureaucracy. It's a startup mindset with an established curriculum, if you like. So to continue to like always be thinking blue skies, always be thinking what's different now? Where's the new curve? I'll give you an example. Charlie Kirk is about to bring out a book in a few months' time after his death, but it's being published on Shabbos. And there's a big discussion about whether we should be using a Christian pastor essentially as promoting Shabbos, and that's not for the focus of today's discussion. But what Charlie Kirk is definitely riding is a wave of people in a world of digital noise that they're saying we need a digital detox. We need this time to switch off. And if you look at the Shabbos project this past Shabbos, what Rabbi Warren Goldstein said openly was that he wants to focus not on the challah bakes and the Havdalah concerts, but on people switching their phones off for 25 hours. Wow. And I know many people who this Shabbos switched their phones off, and I wrote to one of them after Shabbos, and I said, how was it? And they said it was really tough, because when someone's addicted to this, but at the same time, it was incredible and amazing and enthralling and exhilarating, and they spent time with friends and family like they've never spent before. So that's just an example of a pivot of we are now going to ride a wave, I believe, over the next 5 years of maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years of people which will be looking for Shabbos, will be looking for those kosher phones eventually, I believe. They'll say, oh, wow, look, these from people, they had these kosher phones. Where can we get a kosher phone? Because they'll be looking for their kids and for themselves. Not even so much because of the kosher element of it, just because of the distraction element of it. I think that what JLE's been unbelievable at doing, and that's what the coaching that I had in the first 7-8 years before I took over running it, is to constantly ask yourself, not have we done, not just because we've done it, we should continue to do it, but sometimes that's the very, very reason why you would not continue to do it. Because those things usually have a case of diminishing returns. It's constant asking, what do our students want? Where are young professionals at? What is it that's in their lives that now needs addressing? And finding a way to connect with them at that point, and through that, bringing people in.
Fascinating. What would you say to people who, just playing devil's advocate, who say Torah learning is the absolute way to anchor somebody for long-term growth and long-term commitment? How do we straddle both sides of that coin?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we believe in. I would say that, the JLE, it does what it says on the tin, is Jewish Learning Exchange. We believe that people who are rooted in Torah have a much greater chance of living a Torah lifestyle. I would say that when you look around the world at communities of Bali Tshuva, there's a very clear distinction between those that have a relationship with Abai and Rava and those that don't. I can't necessarily explain it mystically, but I can tell you that absolutely when someone has become a Baal Tshuva and all they have is what I call the dessert, the Kabbalistic, mystical relationship, and they love Hashem, but you ask them, how high is a sukkah allowed to be, and they don't know, the chances of their survival is very, very limited. The Torah is like the bread and butter of our lives, and at JLE from 6:30 in the morning through to 11 o'clock at night, we have people, many who are not even Shomer Shabbos, who are engaged with true Torah learning. And we try and fast track people into that as soon as they can. There's something that a black Gemara can do that nothing else could do. Now, you might say, well, what's the point of learning a black Gemara without Emunah? Yes, it's holistic. In the same way, every yeshiva bacha needs to have a black Gemara, but also needs to daven, and also needs to have Emunah, needs to have Musa, and in different quantities, different yeshivas, our own children. It's not that different. People talk about non-from people as if they're other, right? They talk about, well, what do they want to learn? The answer is, they're just like me and you. Non-from people are also people. They're also growth-orientated. They're also looking for meaning. They're also looking for Shabbos. They're also looking for all the things that we live and love. So in the same way, if we lived our lives without a Seder Hayom, without a connection with Torah, who would we be? It's the same thing for a Baal Tshuva. Except I would say this one thing is that sometimes they need also to learn Aleph Beis, but so do our kids. And sometimes they also need to learn Emunah ideas, but so do our kids. So absolutely, it's not one side of the coin or the other, it's one coin.
Right. Fascinating. Was Rabbi Nemeth's that hire? Was that part of that vision to help root people?
100%. Look, Rabbi Nemeth is our Senior Director of Education and our Rosh Beis Medrash, and has an unbelievable following of people who in an unapologetic way. He teaches them real Torah, but also loves them and leads them, and people are feeling looked after. Because again, as much as I say it's about the Torah, we all know that many of us don't remember a single thing that our Magid Shir and Shir Beis or Shir Gimel or Yeshiva Gedolah taught us many times, but we'll remember how they made us feel. And that's also an equally part of Kiruv and teaching in Chinuch. Any Rebbe or school teacher today, that's what I'm saying. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. A teacher in school today who only cares about the teaching but doesn't care about the Talmud will unlikely have created Talmidim. Ha'amidu Talmidim Harba means to make them stand up, to empower them. It goes back to what we were talking about Rav Berkovitz, to believe in people. There's many things that people quote from Rav Berkovitz's Torah, but I think that the most incredible part of what he does is the way he empowers people who are artistic or talented to strive for more, to believe in more, and in themselves.
It's really the JLE umbrella. It's a powerhouse of these different angles. You mentioned the startup mentality, but built on that legacy of 40 plus years and taking all these mechanisms that you're saying apply to kids and regular from adults and just bolting it into a system that can teach and fuel other people. Really fascinating.
It's very interesting. It's often people, look at Kiruv as something they're scared of. If I believe that every person has someone non-from in their life who they could impact, and you probably wouldn't need Kiruv professionals if every from Yid would just connect with one or two people that are in their circle of friends or colleagues or whatever. And I was just sitting at a show of the other night, and this person told me that he's got a guy in Paris who works for him, or he came across him, and now they learn together on a chavrusa, they once a week, and the guy he bought him tefillin. That is the real Kiruv, right? I think that's the future. That's really what happens when Klal Yisrael takes that type of sense of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh. But yeah, there's no question that although people are kind of always waiting to hear the juicy thing about what the animals in the zoo do, these people are just the same as me and you. And I knew that because my parents are Bali Tshuva. We lived in the suburb. My father was an investment banker, as he mentioned. I was born in New York because he was working out there on Wall Street, and my mother worked for a big animation studios there. And my grandparents, who were not from, were just normal people. And my uncles and aunties were just normal people. And that's what gave me the confidence, which I think a lot of those of us who grew up in the Frum community kind of don't get that opportunity. It's just to realize this is just a yid, it's a neshama. It's not what kapel you wear or don't wear. It's someone who's just like me and you. And what turns us on, if we're passionate about Yiddishkeit, it's infectious, and other people will want it too.
That's really, really beautiful. You wanted to take this vision global. My sources tell me that the wildly successful History for the Curious podcast was your brainchild. Is that correct?
Well, I can't take any type of sense of success from what the History for the Curious has done, because Rabbi Hirsch and Mena are incredible and they really deserve the credit for themselves. I think that there was a discussion at the beginning when we first started about someone like Rabbi Hirsch is such a talent and such a global talent, so unique. He shouldn't be just being used for a platform like locally, but we should look at this globally. And there was no one better than Mena Reisner to do it. So they're the ones which can really take the credit for what they've built. I may have had a part to do with it. I actually can't even recall.
I'm just trying to put the dots together of this mentality.
But the idea that we want what we're trying to do is global is very much an inherent part of the vision. In fact, we have been for the last 7, 8, 9 years had a very close relationship with Olami, which is a global vision of having a global movement of where Jews in every place that they are can connect. And I think one of the things that we're trying to figure out over the coming months and years is to ensure that as Jews move around the world, that if they leave JLE, that they have a place to continue that journey. And the Olami vision is that it's that you would kind of leave your Olami affiliate in London, but you would find your Olami affiliate in New York or France or South Africa or wherever it is. So yeah, we do. I do sit on an advisory board for Olami already for the last 8, 9 years. We do strategize about diaspora Jews, and it's become a very exciting time since October 8th, because there are so many what we call October 8th Jews who are now looking to connect. And whereas we used to have to go and find them, they now seek us out.
I work a lot with businesses, and I'm just hearing this mindset of a businessman in the world of Kiruv, and it's just fascinating to hear how you frame everything in such terms, and the strategizing and thinking of new ways and tapping into new potentials. I'm sure you're coming across new people, and part of your role requires you to reach out to new profiles and to interact and to build and curate relationships with quite high profile people over the years that you've been doing this. What does the roadmap look like for you from identifying the profile you want to connect with, making the connection and getting them in your corner. What does that roadmap look like for you, and what can we learn from it?
Okay, so you want me to spill all the secrets. It's interesting. Let's just reframe it, being totally open. How on earth do you fundraise from these people that other people find really hard to access, and how do you build that relationship, etc.? So I'm going to address the first point. I think that the biggest challenge with charities is when they're run like charities. This is just a personal pet peeve of mine. The charities where people are going through a 3:00 meeting and then have to already leave at 2:30 because, stroll down the street, grab a coffee. There isn't that urgency of the mission, I think, is the reason why there can be mediocrity in the charity sector. And I think every charity needs to have a really good look at itself and realize that yes, it might be not for profit, but it needs to run for the sake of its objectives and its KPIs similar to a business, because essentially the investors and the donors expect that from you. And it's really mizrach lamarav. It's like a completely different type of environment. For the good and for the bad, I think that, when you work in an environment which is mediocre, then it's a much safer environment. It doesn't matter what you do. You've always got a job for life. You can sit and park in a school or whatever it is, and no one's ever going to fire you because your job is safe. Even if all the boys and girls are going off the derech, the main thing is to protect the teacher's job. Personally, in JD, we don't do that. And I think there's an upside to it. I think there's also a downside. It means that we're constantly asking ourselves to perform. But I think that goes to the innate power point, which we spoke about, which is if you believe you have something to give Klal Yisrael or the charity, then use it. If not, then get out and get yourself a different job. Everyone's got something they can give. I don't think you should be scared of not being employed or employable elsewhere. You've got something to give. If you can give it in the charitable sector, do. In this charitable sector, do. If not, then do it somewhere else. It's fine. It's not like the charity system should not be a benefit system. And people should want to judge themselves and be accountable to themselves more than to their bosses in that way. Now we're going to go to the fundraising element and how do you do that? So
I didn't bring up fundraising, but you've gone there, and I had a question scheduled on fundraising. Just let me add in one part to the question of fundraising, because I work a lot with charities, and a lot of them, when it comes to the fundraising time of year, it's like, oh gosh, we've got to go through this again. Yeah. And they feel like the underdog, like they've got to go out there and reach out to people and what do we say, what don't we say? But you've created a vessel that people want to invest in. This is that they're proud to partner with you on this project. And I really feel there's something...
That really goes to the other point that you asked. And it's about how do you identify the people, and then how do you build from that people the relationship? And then from that relationship, how do you avoid it being the thing which is, that part of year where you hate fundraising? So this is a really important point. I'm really happy that I have this opportunity to say this here on your forum, because I can't tell you how passionate I feel about it. And it's really... It looks like two of the same things, but it's two completely different things. There's one approach which people often talk to me about, and people will say, send me a text if it comes to their charity extra, and they're a parent in school, and say, I'm really sorry to do this, and I'm so sorry to have asked you for this. And you know how much I hate fundraising, but if you don't mind, could I please? I call it the schnorrer approach. And I remember when I first started fundraising, then my mother-in-law said to me, Benjy, do you not mind being a schnorrer? And the schnorrer concept is you're knocking on the door, you're asking, can you please? So number one is, a schnorrer is asking for themselves, right? And I think that that's an important thing. But also I said to her at the time, it was Barack Obama, but you can apply it to Donald Trump. I said, do you think Donald Trump doesn't fundraise? Do you think the biggest hedge funds in the world don't do rounds of fundraising? And those people don't apologize and say, I'm so sorry, I have to do this. So what is the difference? The difference is, are you schnorring on a personal level, number one? Second of all, besides for not asking for yourself, are you embarking on a mission where you're adding value to the community and to the donor or investor in what you're doing? And do you believe in it enough that you're looking for something which you believe you're giving far more to the donor or investor than you're receiving yourself? Rav Dessler wrote this, and he used to tell this over to the people in Gates of Koil Youth Collector. He said, as long as you think that you are asking a favor from the person who's sitting that gevir, and he's doing you a bigger favor than you're doing to him, you will never be able to raise money, all right? Whereas the point where you realize that actually you've got Torah, you're learning as Avreichim in Gates of Koil, and you've got the most precious thing in the world, and you're offering him that opportunity to be a part of it, is the moment when everything flips. And you can go back to the Ponevezh Rov, and you can go to Rav Shalom Ber Sorotzkin, you can go to Eli Bia, and you can go to any of the great fundraisers. It's very simple. It's literally night and day. It's a very simple mindset. Do you A, add value to the relationship, and B, do you create partnerships and investments where you believe that what you have is incredible and they have a zchus to be a part of it. And far too much of both kiruv and chinuch and fundraising is this mindset of where it's a bit nebuch, I feel a bit bad, let me knock on your door, don't worry about it, it's fine, to the audacity of the great fundraisers who have, I heard from Rabbi Kruskal, who runs Tikva, who said to me once, he went to a guy in America and the guy said to him, would you like a donation or whatever it was? I can't remember exactly what it was. And he said to him, yes. And he said to him, okay, I'm going to send you something. So he said, how much is it? He said, $60,000. So he said, the donor says, is that what you were hoping for? And Rabbi Kruskal said, no. So he said, well, what were you hoping for? He said, 100,000. So he said, okay, you got 100,000, right? But that's the idea, the mentality of those people that kind of, again, it's confidence, not arrogance. No one likes it when you tear a check up and you say, that's not good enough. Right. But the idea that we are doing something incredible, like a hedge fund, like getting a president of the United States elected, something much more important. We're building the future of Klal Yisrael in our school, in our yeshiva, in our kollel. And that goes to the business part as well, because people come to me to collect for kollelim, and the way that they approach it is that £10 or £18 or even £100 is a lot of money. And if this kollel has a £1.7 million budget or even a £360,000 budget, that's not enough. They're going to have to spend days and days and days. And I saw, for example, one of the very successful kollelim, Rabbi Tanzer's kollel in Yerushalayim, he comes to Gevirim with a profile of Avrechim, and a profile where he says, look, this guy's learning Menachos and this guy's learning Shabbos. Which one do you want to partner with? And they've got a photo and the photo of the family and a photo of this farm. And then they create a relationship where that donor learns once a week or once a month with this Avrech. And when they make a simcha and when they send, this is Yisach and Zvulun, the Torah's idea of Yisach and Zvulun. The Gemara in Sota, I believe, and the Medrash also brings this. It's Sota Chaf Aleph, I believe, but also the Medrash brings this. It's like obvious, is that the idea that it was never charity. Yisach and Zvulun was a partnership. And Yisachar doesn't need to be embarrassed about going to Zvulun. In fact, he's giving Zvulun more than Yisachar gives him. So it doesn't only apply to Kiruv, it applies to any part of Avodas HaKodesh. If like any of the Rosh Kodelim are out there listening, or Rosh Yeshivas out there listening, they know that the biggest change that flip with is, can they add value to this donor? Can they really give that person something they feel they're part of something? But also, can they create that relationship where they're partners in this and they're investors in this, and then people are proud because together we did something incredible.
Unbelievable. Just unbelievable to hear all that. Very articulate and really meaningful to hear that entire mindset. I appreciate you sharing your playbook, so to speak. I want to go back for a minute to something you mentioned before about everyone's ability to interact and be kind and be nice. It's not about being fully trained Kiruv professional to make a difference, but sometimes just giving somebody a shoulder to lean on, listening it, and making somebody feeling valued and important can really start the journey for them. And doing my research, I came across an incredible story that took place with yourself when you were a rabbi in residence for a Pesach program. And there was a family there. You're looking at me.
Go on, tell me.
I've not got all the details in front of me, but there was a family from a very kind of broken background where there was some members of the family completely irreligious, and one child was, one child wasn't, and they came for Pesach, and you made an extra effort to sit with them, sing with them, spend time with them. And since then, it's been a number of years afterwards,
yes.
And she gave up tremendous amount of time in university.
Where did you even come across?
I know a guy.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, look, again, this is going back a number of years, and I always believe in any Kiruv or outreach or chinuch story, it's never one person or one individual. So it would be silly of me to even claim any of the credit here. But to say that you have a part in the story is probably true. And that was an example of, even if I wouldn't have been a Kiruv professional, I would have come across it. But I think the real hero in this story of this girl, which ended up going to Sam and is now Shomer Shabbos today, the real hero in this story is the family, which I may not want to be mentioned, so I'm not going to mention their name, which connected, from family here in London, which connected with this girl, and they invited her for Shabbos, and they kept up with her. And this girl today is now from, and I would say much more to do with that family than the introduction that I made, so to speak. So what's interesting is that if you follow the pathway of people who engage on a growth journey, when they have a relationship with a real family who takes care of them, then the impact is amazing. I mean, I'll give an example. My parents will be coming from when I was 5 years old. We lived in the Hamsgan suburb, and there was someone called Yitzi Bamberger, who was the son of Karen Bamberger, who was a madrich he was an older bacher, but it was like a madrich in the program, in the seed program, and he invited my parents to Karen Bamberger's home, and she was someone who was a survivor of the Auschwitz and was an almana at a very young age and lives here on Sneath Avenue, and she's still alive today, Blian Hara. And that impact of my parents being invited to their home, I would say, was equally as impactful, and in some ways more, than all the shiurim and all the cure of the professionals were doing at the time. So we should never underestimate that as Klal Yisrael, what it means for someone to walk into someone else's random home who's not being paid for it, who's not got any agenda, and they're like, you're looking after me and you'll invite me, that creates a certain feeling of belonging and inspiration to growth that many times a rabbi or kiruv professional can't do.
Very, very powerful. I came across an article that I want to paraphrase.
You've really done your research. I'm really nervous about this.
3 paragraphs. Allow me to just read through these paragraphs, and I want to hear your reflections on this. So you wrote for the Times of Israel, and I'll paraphrase as follows. And so we come to Britain's bitter irony. The nation that once recognized the Jewish people's return to their ancestral homeland now under Starmer lends recognition to those who desecrate that very land with blood. Instead of standing with life, democracy and dignity, Britain now chooses hatred, corruption and anti-Semitism disguised as diplomacy. This will not end well for Britain. A country that abandons Israel abandons its own moral compass, and when a nation abandons its moral compass, it loses its way in the world. History will not remember Sir Keir Starmer as a statesman who brought peace to the Middle East. It will remember him as a politician who mistook appeasement for principle, who confused weakness for wisdom, and who dressed up shame as justice. I'm curious to hear specifically from somebody like yourself who isn't just living within the securities and the familiarities of community. We're very blessed. You know, we shop in the same shops, we daven in the same shuls. We're constantly surrounded by this buffer zone of comfort and security. The people you're working with are not. They're living in that big wide world, and you're trying to pair them and bridge them across into our lives, into this world. How do we make sense of everything that's gone on and looking up at our own leadership and thinking to ourselves, where's the future go from here? And what are you telling the people who you're interacting with?
So it's a great question. The only thing I would adjust there is that I don't see any government as our leadership. Our leadership are the Gedolim and the Rabbonim, right? So it's funny because I remember when I arrived in the States, which people are more patriotic there, and I was in Yeshiva in Psik, and they said, I think it was Tony Blair at the time, and someone said, oh, you're prime minister. And I was like, the fact that the guy had given me a shtech because Tony Blair had said something meant nothing personal to me. Although we do live in this country, and at the same time, you know, there's definitely a lot of feeling of angst and uncertainty. In fact, I would recommend, because it's not within the scope of this podcast, for people to listen to the latest History for the Curious podcast, where Rabbi Hirsch and Rabbi Menno Reisner address this, and they've got Rabbi Zev Leff and Lord Wolfson on talking about, is there a future for Jews in this country? Oh, wow. What I will say is, and this is what I meant in the article, is that when the Satmar Rebbe used to say that even though he was violently anti-Zionist, when the non-Jews are anti-Zionist, they're really anti-Jewish. Therefore, we need to be able to stand up and defend that. So when we talk about that, every nation that has ever blessed the Jewish people or been a blessing to Jewish people has thrived, and you look throughout history, and those that have cursed have been cursed, is the pasuk that was given to Avraham Avinu. And there's no doubt that this country, now in the current state that it is, maybe it might not be malicious, but that place of appeasement is not blessing the Jewish people, and through that, I don't believe it will end well for them. I don't think this government will be blessed. That's what I was referring to there. Right. I wasn't referring to, therefore, people in Britain are no longer safe, or Jews in Britain are no longer safe. And that's a whole other question, which I would say should be addressed. Everyone's got different opinions. I think the fact that there are different opinions shows that it's a real subject. One of the things, the directions that I heard from my Rav, Rabbi Zimmerman, is that as long as the institutions don't create an anti-Semitic view, then you cannot compare it to the 1930s Germany. There may be certain nods of irrelevant appeasement right now, and they may be allowing pro-Palestinian marches, but you cannot compare that to Germany of 1930s, where they were taking people's bank accounts away as part of the laws of the country. Right. And one thing which I will say is every person needs to ask their Rav, and there's a Vayetze, there's a Vayelech. We haven't seen any Gedolim say it's so dangerous for Jews to live here right now, you need to get up and go. And I think that in the broader Jewish community is a very interesting phenomena, because it's the first time that many Jews have come to me and said, I used to see myself as a British Jew, and now I see myself as a Jew in Britain. And there's definitely this hisayrus, which I believe is actually a positive one. Never let a crisis go, without the opportunity that comes along with it. Is that I do believe that there's a huge opportunity now for Jews that no longer feel safe in their country, for them to find safety as part of Klal Yisrael. And that doesn't mean that we should ignore the telltale signs on the wall. And I do believe that the chances are in 50 years' time, there'll be a much more diminished presence of Jews in this country. But I don't believe it's right now where we are today. What I believe and what I've heard from Rabbi Zimmerman, who has discussed this extensively, we do not face a mokum sakona, as you like. You're mad for staying. Why are you not setting up? You should be going to a place like America where no Jews get murdered in synagogues, because they do. Or a place like Eretz Yisrael where there isn't Yidden who, chas v'chayila, are hurt because they're Yidden. We are part of a golus, and this is a hisoris, I believe, of us all recognizing that the golus is not comfortable and we're not here to stay. And the fact that around the world, Jews from every corner of the earth now feel that, you know what, maybe I need to go to Israel, maybe I need to connect with my Yiddishkeit, maybe I'm no longer that American Jew, is the wake-up call that in the Kirov perspective we've been waiting for, because there was a comatose of people which just felt, I'm American. 79% of American college-age kids who are Jewish were assimilating. That's 4 in 5. That's a huge amount. That's almost the numbers that didn't leave Mitzrayim. Yeah. So, we're now faced with a situation where there's the last call, I believe it, of people who want to join, get on the bandwagon. And by the way, it applies to the From Kehillah too. The fact that we, in our From Kehillah, we can, like you say, we can go to Kosh Kingdom and we could hop to Eretz Yisrael. I feel the last few years where it's become much more difficult to Eretz Yisrael is because, when it's so easy, you kind of think, yeah, Mashiach would be a great additional extra, but steak, chips, and a good starter and something for dessert is also good, And now we're kind of asking ourselves, okay, wow, we're really a bit uncomfortable. That's given us, I believe, a huge opportunity for our own yearning for Teshuvah and for Mashiach.
Really, really powerful. I'm conscious of your time, and I know you've got other things lined up for today, including, as we're discussing, a trip to Eretz Yisrael. 2 more questions, and I'm going to let you go. Reading suggestions. We're into the winter, long Friday nights. What is Rabbi Morgan reading now, and what would some great recommendations be just to help us open our minds, explore new ideas, broaden our understanding of big topics?
It's very interesting. There are a number of books which I would recommend. I happen to have been a Talmud of Ramatzio because Ramatzio looked after my family when we moved to Gateshead, and I was zeicha to get my Afikomen present for 2 years in a row, which is inscribed. I've still got them. I remember my father saying to me at the time, hold on to this because it'll be worth money someday. And Ramatzio was a legend of a giant of a leader. I do speak from some type of bias on that because obviously I was very connected with him. And when I was in America, I used to go to him for Shabbos once every 3 or 4 weeks. And so having a book now that has been brought up, the biography on Ramatzio is something which I would highly recommend. And alongside that, I think that he wrote a book about 20 years ago, which came out. One was with Hearts Full of Love and one was with Hearts Full of Faith. And reading through the chapters again today, we are in a world where those chapters make so much more sense. He has a chapter on Kiruv, which is about taking achrayas and understanding why people should live learning Koil, even though Kiruv is such a huge responsibility, which is a fascinating concept. But in general, the with Hearts Full of Love is something so needed because I look at my own kids and the challenges they face, and the only chance that we have in a world today where the street is so warm is for the house to be even warmer and for the school to be even warmer and for us to ignite that fire and that passion of Yiddishkeit, which comes from love. And that's why I said it's not that dissimilar, whether it's kiruv or chinuch or anything else. We have such a huge responsibility to ensure that our kids love their Yiddishkeit and they feel loved within themselves and from the homes and the rabbeim that they have. It's not about the subjects or the topics. It's about the inherent feeling that your parents or teachers or rabbeim empower and make you feel. So that would be, through a dark winter, I would say that Ramatzio's light now can shine through his recent book and those that were printed many years ago.
That's really beautiful. It's clear that you don't settle for the status quo. And you mentioned the startup mindset, and I think it's very clear that that's what's driving you. What's next on the cards for Rabbi Benjy Morgan?
Stay tuned. We do have some really interesting plans. We are in the process now of really exploring this relationship on a global level, and to take the expertise and the lessons that we've learnt in JLE to 312 organizations in 112 cities in 30 countries. And we're in some really interesting discussions now with those parties, because what we really feel really strongly is that we have a unique window of opportunity, maybe not in my lifetime, I've never seen this, but maybe not since 1967, of where Jews are looking to connect. And if you're not part of this world, you may not see it. But they themselves call themselves October 8th Jews. And we're through this network, we're reaching 75,000 young Jews every year, but I want that to be 1 million. We want to leave no Jew left behind. We want to be able to allow every Yid in Klal Yisrael to feel part of Klal Yisrael and to grow. And there's a huge Hasorus. I mean, in Eretz Yisrael, I saw someone sent me a clip of tens of thousands of Chilonim Shomrei Shabbat, and people who are keeping Shabbos now, and maybe they're wearing a black hat, probably they're not, but they're looking to connect. And I think that is a very exciting wave of the future, and it's the final thrust before Mashiach, the last chance saloon. So yeah, that's what we're looking to do, and that's what we're going to be working on in the months and weeks ahead.
Unbelievable. I can't thank you enough. I can probably sit here for another couple of hours and dig into every level of that. And
I have to say, I'm really impressed by your research. I didn't know what to expect today, but you dug out stories that I couldn't remember.
I appreciate it. Look, when a guest doesn't ask me to hear the questions beforehand, I know it's going to be a good conversation. So thank you very much. What can I say? Hashem should give you the energy, the koyach and strength and presence of mind to just continue the mammoth task and to keep going, keep accomplishing, and to keep making a huge impact with Klal Yisrael at large. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you.
On the 18th of June this year, I had a routine dental treatment. This dental treatment, for whatever reason, caused a small infection in my tooth that went undetected, and within 5 days had spread to my brain. And I was rushed to hospital. After a few days, they said, "We need to rush you into an emergency brain surgery." There's nothing in life that can really prepare you for when a doctor walks into the room and says that if we don't operate right now, you only have another 12 hours to live. The infection had spread into the part of the brain which controls the sight, and I was at any point in that time at great danger of losing my sight, losing my vision, losing the opportunity to ever walk or talk again. Only 2 out of every 10 people come out of this alive. And I realized at that moment that I had not seen my kids since I'd been admitted to hospital. And then it dawned on me that they may never see me again, and they may never hear from me again. And I took my phone, and I looked at my phone, and I addressed every single one of my kids, one by one, as if I may never speak to them again. It was a moment of real darkness. It was a moment of real hopelessness in my life. But at the same time, it was also an opportunity for me to light a small flame of hope against that backdrop of darkness. And I took lessons from what I've been taught throughout our history, the lessons of Chanukah, the lessons of a little bit of light can dispel a lot of darkness, a little bit of faith. Even when they tell you it's a 1 in a million chance, I took that opportunity to say, you know what? If Hashem wants something to happen, we've seen throughout our own history these things can happen. I got messages on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, from around the globe saying I put on tefillin by the Kotel. There were people which were praying from Israel to New York to Brazil to Argentina, South Africa. People were praying. We saw a huge change over the following days that followed. And when we went to see the surgeon, he said, I can't actually explain this. I can't explain this. After 2 weeks, they released me from the hospital. All of us in our lives, we all have challenges. We all have things that we struggle with. And what comes along with that, usually, is that feeling that it's hopeless, that there's no way to overcome it. But that flame which we lit tonight tells a different story. That's a flame that goes with a chain of generations for thousands of years that says that even when it's all bleak, even when all the odds are stacked up against you, we can prevail, and we do. As individuals and as a community, we can overcome anything. Miracles can happen. That is the message of Chanukah. Don't give up. A little bit of light can overcome. And this year, I've experienced that for myself.